Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce a titan of the field of choral music, pretty much anything he directs his focus toward. I had the pleasure of meeting and working with Dr. Brunelle, and it's doctor because he has 5 honorary doctorates when I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota. I'm thrilled to have him here as our guest and to involve him so he can speak to the VocalEssence Cantaré residency program that he has stewarded for 20 years. And please welcome Dr. Philip Brunelle.
Thank you, Brian. So just a little background on VocalEssence and how this all came about. I started VocalEssence 53 years ago. I think I was 6 at the time. No. Anyway, I started VocalEssence because at that time in Minneapolis, St. Paul, most of the choral music you would hear would be music of, say, the 10 what we call war horses. And so they would perfectly wonderful music, Brahms' Requiem, Handel's Messiah, great. But I kept thinking, what about all the other music that's out there? And so because of that, I started VocalEssence, and one of my mottos that people who know me know is, you don't know if you don't ask. So I thought, I've got to start with a bang. So I picked up the phone and called this guy named Aaron Copeland and said, hi, I'm starting a choral series. Would you come and conduct your choral music? Young man, no one has ever asked me to do that. I like my choral music. Tell me the date. I'll cancel what I'm doing and be there. So Aaron and I became good friends, and I followed him with a number of other composers in the same way. Then, because I'm a very inquisitive person and I'm thinking about music, it was in 1990 that I heard on the radio one February, they played a piece of music by Duke Ellington and said, that's our nod to Black History Month. And I remember thinking, one song? So then I decided, what can I do about this? And I went and met a woman who was African American, who was head of a big foundation. And I said, I really want to do music of African Americans, but I don't want it to look like I'm pandering, because I'm not. I'm just interested. And I remember she said to me, if you don't do this, nobody's going to do it. So we started a program which is still going called Witness, in which we have brought dozens and dozens and dozens of composers and pieces of music to the Twin Cities, and commissioned as well music of African American composers, which is continuing to this day. Then I got thinking, what about Mexico? It's our neighbor. And what do we know about the choral music of our neighbor? And I thought, not a lot. So I thought I have to do something about that. So in 2008, I knew that in Minnesota, we had many, many Mexican residents. Many of them were farming. Many of them were also working in things in restaurants and lots of business. So we had a lot of Mexicans there, certainly well over 200,000 of them. And I thought, we need to do something about this. So it was kind of the same. I called a fellow I didn't know who's Mexican American. His name was Uri Camarena. And we had coffee. And I said, I really want to do something, but I'd like to figure out how I could do this. And my idea was, I would like to go to Mexico City and interview composers and think of bringing them to Minnesota. I knew one composer down there at the time, Jorge Cordoba. So I contacted Jorge and said I would like to come. And we began talking about it. And it was about this time that Mexico opened a consulate in the Twin Cities. Up to then, anyone who wanted any kind of consulate work had to go to Chicago. So now they could go to St. Paul and get this. And so over the years, we've had wonderful supportive help from the consul in St. Paul. One of them, of course, being our dear Alberto Fierro, who was with us for from 2013 to 16. So we've had a number of composers. I'm going to just show you, we've so far had 21 composers, and they have all come to Minneapolis. Let me explain. So this is the first year we had Jorge, Sabina, and Jorge, and then Diana, Jesus, and we brought Jorge back for the second time. Then we moved on from there, and Horacio and Lilia, Diana, Jesus, and then Rodrigo and Jorge came back from the second year. Then we brought Gerardo and Novelli, Jose, Pamela, then Julio and Jean Angelus. Rodrigo was back, Novelli was back. They were doing things in Rochester, Minnesota, which is down in southern Minnesota where the Mayo Clinic is. Then Alexis came, and of course I did not know that Alexis is the brother of Diana Circe that we had brought in an earlier year. And then Francisco and Rodrigo's back, and Samuel, and then Jimena and Bernardo, and then Pablo. And then Julio came, but that then was just about the time when we had, of course, the pandemic, and then we had to stop what we're doing, and we will begin it again. So all of these composers, basically what ended up happening, well, in fact, before we do that, let me play you one of the pieces of music. So we've commissioned dozens of pieces from these composers. And this piece is one that was composed by Jesus Lopez. Jesus was the organist at the cathedral in downtown Mexico City, but now he is the organist director at the cathedral at Guadalupe. And so he composed a song that I have at VocalEssence. We have 4 groups. We have a professional choir of 32, which is the group that will sing this. We have a volunteer choir of 110. We have a youth choir of 40, and that youth choir looks like our community. So I would say out of 40, we don't do numbers, but it's probably maybe some who are, you know, white, some who are black, some who are green, some who are yellow, some who are every color. I mean, we have the whole gamut there in that group. And then last of all, we've started opening choirs in retirement homes. But we don't want to call them old people's choirs. So we call them vintage voices. And they love that, believe me, very much. So here's Jesus' piece, which I would just tell you before we move it here. Jesus said about it, it's an introspective reflection from the poet Amado Nervo on his own life, allowing us to see through a quick analysis how he built the environment around his life, summed up by saying, I was the architect of my own destiny. So this is this piece, En Paz, which the ensemble singers performed, and you get to follow the music.
Amén. Fui amado. El sol acarició mi faz. Vida, nada me debes. Vida, estamos en paz.
I didn't want to do just a little bit of it. You needed to see how the ending came around to what was at the beginning to make it work. So I thought, now it's time to figure out how to make this project work. I also knew that this was going to be a project for composers of choral music. I love band music, but this was not about band music. And not all band composers are choral composers. Not all choral composers are band composers. There are some who can do both, but not all. So I knew going there that I needed to interview people. I did not want to just send me your music and I'll look at it. Because I also was knowing these are people who are going to be coming and working in public schools. They're going to be with elementary and high school and college. So what kind of personality? As you all know, not everybody is a great teacher in school. And so therefore I was concerned about how all that would happen. And so Jorge helped me to find that first year composers. So I interviewed 8 composers and chose 3 to come. And my idea was I would bring them 3 times to Minnesota. Almost without exception, none of them had ever been to Minnesota. They didn't know where it was. But all you have to say is, do you know where the Mississippi River is? Oh, yes, yes, they knew that. I said, the Mississippi River starts in Minnesota, up at the Canadian border. Ah, okay, now we know where it is. Many had never seen a thing called snow, but they got to see it. So I said, you're going to come 3 times. You're going to come in the fall and meet your choirs. And having heard them and met them and spent a week, then you go back to Mexico and compose. And then send the music at the beginning of January and have the choirs begin working on it. Then come back in March, and which is a perfectly beautiful time in Minnesota. Not. And so you come back in March. Oh, a couple of them. I remember coming out of their hotel room and it was snowing. Oh, I want to hold some of that. I said, well, good luck. You know, most of us didn't need to hold snow. We'd been around that enough. So they came in March and saw how their music was going. That went well. And then we kept working. And then they would come back in May and we would do a concert of all the music from the various schools. And we specifically were hoping, and we succeeded in getting people, families, friends from the Mexican community to come to the concerts. And so we had that program, which is what we did the first year. And we called it Cantaré because that just seemed to be what we were about. We did that. Then when I was there, thanks to Alberto and others, I met also with people down in Mexico City. I met with the Mexican officials. I also met with officials at our US Embassy because I had to get visas for everybody. So every year I would repeat this and say what I was looking for. The great thing, as the years have gone along, the composers who have been with us can tell other people, hey, let me tell you about Minnesota. You know, right, okay, because they had no idea. So we began to established. So now we have what's called the Cantaré Club. And when I go down there, we always have a big dinner one night because they get a, and many of them did not know each other because they're not all from Mexico City. But for their interviews, they all came to Mexico City. So I did them in one location. And we found that doing this, of course, regarded it needed funding, and some funding we got from the Mexican government to help with flights. I also, of course, had to raise the money. We had them stay in hotels, and we had to provide a car. I made the assumption incorrectly that all of them had driver's licenses. No. So anyway, so then we found, okay, well, we have to help drive and all that. But we found a way to make that all work and found the hotels and found the cars and the meals and all that had to go with it. And I mentioned we had all of these dozens now of pieces that we did. So some of them were not for an advanced choir like the one you just heard. Some of them were for kids. So here's one other example of a piece. This one was composed by Rodrigo Cadet. And Rodrigo is actually Mexican, but he's from Haiti originally. And his father, I said, how did your English? It's so good. He said, my father was an English professor. So obviously he knew English. And his piece, he said in his note, when I composed this piece, I was thinking about childhood and how often we tend to underestimate the intellectual and emotional capacity of children. We may think that their emotions revolve only around happiness, and we forget that children can also feel sadness, love, or fear. After reflecting upon this, I decided to compose a sad song that would express another emotional side of our humanity. Then I discovered a beautiful text by Jose Gorotzia that speaks to us of a child who, tired of being unloved, decides to go to the marketplace in search of someone who would buy his heart and give him love.
¿Quién me compra una naranja para mi consolación?
That was done those are 7-year-old kids singing that. And that was done at one of our concerts at the end of the year when they came together. So these composers all come 3 times, as I mentioned. There's only 2 rules. One, you are here 50% to compose music, and you are here 50% to be an ambassador for Mexico. And, there is a third rule. You cannot compose anything in English. It can be in any of the indigenous languages of Mexico. Doesn't matter. Whatever you choose, but not English. So all these kids learned different languages and thought it was cool, believe me, to do this. I still hear from people, a parent will come to me and say, you won't remember, but my child was there the 2nd year and now is in college and is taking Spanish because of that year when you had a Cantaré composer come to their school. It all does happen. It comes around. So I found then the next thing was, how do we record all of this? So we've done a series of 6 recordings. And now one of the great things is that we're working with one of the youth choirs in Mexico City who want to record all of the youth pieces with a Mexican choir in Mexico City. So that's in the process of happening. We also, of course, have published many of these pieces. So we started the thing that we called VocalEssence Music Press. So the piece you just heard and the other one we published so that people could just order these things and print up their own copies of them as well to have. And it's really taken off, which is also a wonderful thing. So where is it going to go in the future? Well, we're going to continue what we're doing. We've had this hiatus because of the pandemic, but we're now going to be continuing, finding new ways that Cantaré can continue. We've done it in the Twin Cities. We've also taken it outstate. We've taken it to southern Minnesota, into several of the farming communities and had one of the composers there. We also had one in Rochester. And our newest adventure, which started about 4 years ago, we made a link with one of the choirs in Chicago. And so a composer now goes to Chicago and works with the choirs there through a group called Chicago A Cappella. And so my dream, not there yet, is that we could have a Cantaré program in 50 states. So I've only got 48 to go, but we're going to keep working on it. But the big challenge is finding the link in the state of somebody who could take this on and not just do it once, but would say, okay, I think we can make this go. We can make it work from there. So when Brian called me and said, hey, can we talk about this? I said, I don't know where this all will lead, but I just know that I am very committed to making the music of Mexican composers work in Minnesota. And we've, of course, the children ask questions. And, when we heard this morning about, preconceptions, one of my favorites was, in Mexico City, are there as many people as in Minneapolis? I went, oh, slightly more. And another one was, do you, a second grader, do you have cars in Mexico? Yes, they have cars. And to me, there are no bad questions. I love all of them. We just have to answer them and help increase their knowledge of what's going on. So it's been a very fulfilling proposal and a program, 21 composers now, which is 21 Mexican composers more than anybody else has done in the US, but we're not done. We will continue. So Thank you, Brian, for allowing me to do this. Thank you.